Lonoik makahiki, happy holidays to everybody. We're here on agenda item C1 as a for information only on the approval of legislative proposal to authorize limited casino gaming in the form of a single integrated resort property in Kapolei, island of Oʻahu, on Hawaiian homelands designated for commercial use. To address a question at the outset, I know for many of you, especially at home, are wondering why now? Why in December, a month before the legislative session, is this coming out? And I'm happy to address that at the upfront. About a month and a half ago is when the Star Advertiser article was first released and we were on the front page. And universally, it was agreed that the status quo is not working for our department. The status quo is not working for our beneficiaries. And so I challenged our staff to think critically and think outside of the box about what we could do differently, about what the one big move we could take could be to make a difference in the next 100 years. It also happened that around that time was the final economic projection. We're looking at a $1.4 billion deficit annually every year for 4 years. I think Commissioner Taruya brought that up. And when you consider the economic deficit that the state is facing, if you consider that the program and the system set up around it is not working for our beneficiaries, now is the most important time to consider measures like this. Going into the legislative session, there will not be money for the legislature to hand out, but there will be rights and opportunities. And so I apologize that this is a month before the legislative session, but this may be the one legislative opportunity we have to take advantage of what we can using our resources. So without further ado, the first issue that the department is up against is a matter of basic economics. It's supply versus demand. Up on the screen right now is a listing of all applicants for residential leases only on each of the islands. You'll see that Oʻahu makes up over 50% of individuals waiting for homesteads. Compare that to, in bold, the supply, what's available. Simply put, we cannot put 10,870 Oʻahu applicants in 1,600 acres of land. We can't even put the 1,699 applicants on Kauai in those 1,100 acres because of the costs associated with it. At the very base level, we simply do not have enough developable residential land to solve our need. The second problem we're facing is an issue of time. If we are to continue at the rate that we are currently producing homes, it will take us 182 years to solve the problem of the wait list. And that's assuming that nobody else applies after today. And we know that's not going to happen. Second, we know that more than half of our waitlisters are over the age of 60. Many of them want infrastructure and want homes because they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the family to help them construct a home. And so while we've offered a diverse number of offerings, many of our waitlisters are limited by their age alone. And lastly, and most soberingly, at least 2,000 Native Hawaiians have died on the waitlist. Simply, we cannot allow another 2,000, let alone another 200 to die if we can try. And so we're asking for your open minds in considering this bill, because this bill is designed to help us put Hawaiians on our lands in homes. It's designed to help us address the wait list. This bill is designed to stop Native Hawaiians from dying on the wait list. And so the question is, how do we plan to do it, and why gaming? And what I plan to do is show you some of the data from our cousins on the continent, the Indian tribes who have benefited from similar arrangements. I want to be very clear because I think that there is sometimes controversy around the difference between Native Hawaiians and our Indian cousins. This bill does not require federal recognition. This bill does not get into federal law. This bill does not trigger the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. All it is an administrative bill under state law to give us the authority to do something like this. And so while I'm offering data on Indian tribes as a comparison, by no means is this bill meant to put us in a similar situation or to attempt to gain the same rights that Indian tribes have. Lastly, there is an issue of money. And so I'm going to try and illustrate what our problems are currently. Just a couple of months ago, this commission approved our fiscal 22-23 budgetary request. If you recall, we requested from the governor and the legislature $145.9 million. That is what this department and this commission believes is necessary to deliver for the next fiscal year. By comparison, this is what we received last year, $20 million, 1/7 of our ask, $120 million short. Right now, there is no solution that has been proposed to make up the gap between $145.9 million and $20 million. None. I think it is very easy to say that delivering on this mission is simple, that the department does not need more money. This chart alone shows you that the suggestion that money is not the issue is not based in reality. But let's put it into an even larger perspective. Let's consider the lot developments we did in Kapolei, where it cost $150,000 just to put in the infrastructure alone for those lots. If we were to assume that every lot here on out was just as easy to develop as Kapolei, which isn't true because it's even harder in Oʻahu, for example, but let's assume that it's at the cheapest at $150,000 a lot. With 28,000 individuals on the wait list at $150,000, we are looking at an infrastructure bill at $4.5 billion on the low end, all the way up to $12 billion just for the infrastructure on existing lots alone. This does not even account for the acquisition of new land. The reason we cannot solve the wait list is because of this gap here. And like I said, there are no other solutions being put forth to figure out where the money is going to come from. And so that's what we have for you today. Currently in the United States, there are 29 states that allow for tribal gaming, and they're on the screen now. If we look at the National Indian Gaming Commission's gross revenue by region, you can see that the range expands from the low $368 million in gross revenue in rural regions like Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota to as high as $9.2 billion in California and just half of Nevada. In total, 501 gaming operations by tribes across our country exist. They bring in $33 billion in revenue. Of the 29 tribes that currently allow gambling, let's consider the top 16 grossers. These circles represent the proportion of which they bring in revenue. Obviously, California being the largest. The second number underneath illustrates the number of facilities in that state. The third number illustrates the number of jobs in this industry that gaming brings. What's important to note is states like Connecticut, states like Florida or North Carolina, where they have between 2 and 8 casino operations, are competitive on the national market because it's not about the number of casinos you have in your state. It has to do with quality of the casino. It has to do with investment by state and local government. And so to that end, we can estimate from the data that a single casino in Hawaii could introduce an additional 3,000 to 8,000 new jobs and careers that did not previously exist. And not just jobs in the service industry. These are jobs in managerial and executive positions that previously did not exist. Lastly, this is what the tax revenue for those states are. $156 million on the low end in Louisiana to as much as $3 billion of tax revenue in California. This is what's possible with this bill. And so we're asking for your open mind, not just to help us fulfill the mission by increasing our revenue, but to consider what the possibility here is. So we're going to go into what this bill does. This bill gives authority to the governor to appoint a 5-member commission. There'll be the Hawaii Gaming Commission. It'll be administered as an attached administrative agency under DHHL, but it will not be controlled by DHHL. DHHL will not have any operation oversight, and that's to maintain integrity. You want to make sure that if DHHL is the beneficiary of all that revenue, that it is not also controlling the oversight. And so we created a separate commission. That commission, we're looking for a very specific set of expertise, because what we've learned in discussions with tribal experts, with industry experts, is that the quality of individuals on your commission will dictate its success. So we're looking for individuals with experience in corporate finance and securities, criminal investigations and law enforcement, legal and policy issues related to gaming, regulatory administration or industry management, and we want at least one member to be a Native Hawaiian under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. That commission would then go on to appoint an executive director, and together that would be the Hawaii Gaming Commission, and its staff would be responsible for two priority areas. The first being administration, so issuance of a gaming license, collection of taxes, accounting of revenue, and adoption of regulations. They'd also be responsible for enforcement, so investigations of violations, imposition of fines, inspection of records, ejection of individuals. The reason tribal governments are so successful with their gaming operations is because when you put in the effort on the end of the regulatory framework, when you make sure that the emphasis on integrity and success is there in the upfront at the beginning of these discussions, you have a higher chance of success in the long run. Now, there are a number of concerns in the public right now in the limited time people have had to review this bill about, well, what happens if we introduce one casino? We don't want this to look like Las Vegas. We don't want gaming to be unregulated everywhere. And so this bill is very specific and very limited and creates 5 limitations that effectively prevent expansions of gaming beyond Hawaiian homelands. And so those 5 limitations are: first, it is an issuance of a single 20-year license. No other licenses will be given out. That license is renewable after 20 years, but it's not a guarantee. We placed a condition so that if the licensee wants a renewal, they've got to prove that they delivered on their promise to Hawaiian homelands to generate revenue. Second, it is for a single integrated resort. An integrated resort is a resort facility that may include gaming facilities, but also other recreational activities. There will only be one in the entire state. The limitation will be for on Department of Hawaiian Homelands land. We're not giving this land away. We are not selling it. It remains in our inventory. Instead, we're leveraging the potential of that land for maximum revenue generation. The land would be in Kapolei. And lastly, on land designated for commercial use. Now, this is important in conjunction with in Kapolei. The reason is the remaining commercial land in Kapolei, when it was given to the department, did not allow for us to use it for residential use. So if it's only available for commercial use, then the question before you should be, what is the maximum opportunity for the department to leverage it to our benefit? Now, I understand that there are concerns about beneficiary consultation, and we hear it loud and clear. The reason we selected lands designated for commercial use is that those lands were put out for beneficiary consultation, extensively so, and the beneficiaries agreed that it should be used for that purpose. That said, this bill, it does not decide on what lands an integrated resort might go. It does not decide who's going to build it. We're not even building it tomorrow. But before we get to the point of the department deciding where and what is being constructed, the department will be doing beneficiary consultation with beneficiaries about what benefits we would like to see from this. Now, in order to review the application, to ensure success and make sure that we are delivering on Kuhio's vision and we are making sure that we're focused on goals, we are not going to be building the casino and we are not going to be operating it. We have other important things to focus on. And so that's going to be left to the licensee. And so in their application, these are the things that they're going to be reviewed for by the Gaming Commission. The first is history and experience. We want to know that they have a history of, or they have a bona fide plan for community involvement or investments in Hawaii. We want somebody who is committed to this place. They will need to demonstrate that they have verified sources of capital for development, construction, and maintenance. We want to make sure they have an unblemished history of criminal activity, tax issues or bankruptcy because you do not want to jeopardize the integrity of the process. And they need to provide a development plan that provides maximum revenue to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We also want to make sure that there are community benefits. Native Hawaiians need to benefit from this bill, and the way we've designed it, they will benefit from this bill. The successful applicant needs to demonstrate that there is a training plan in place for Native Hawaiians under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act to qualify for jobs at the integrated resort. They need to demonstrate an economic benefit to the community and demonstrate a plan for community involvement or investment. Indian tribes have been very successful with this. Their casinos have made significant endowments and investments in the educational and university systems, their infrastructural systems, their police departments. There is a lot possible here to make sure that not only does the department see its revenue, but the community grows and thrives. As a part of the community benefits, the applicant will be prohibited from allowing wagering on Hawaii College athletics in any other jurisdictions. And that's because we don't want to jeopardize the integrity of Hawaii athletics. And lastly, they need to have a plan for creating partnerships with UH and existing educational institutions for training and career pathways so that Native Hawaiians under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act have career pathways to jobs at the integrated resort from the educational level. Now, that all sort of talks about the high-level administrative responsibilities left to the commission. This is the portion where DHHL is involved. This is the development agreement. This is our opportunity to leverage the commercial land for maximum benefit. So we're looking to see a minimum $50 million investment for design and construction. DHHL will contribute $5 million to fund initial operations of the Gaming Commission. And before you wonder about that money, Commissioner Tsuruya, the third requirement is that the licensee will be required to refund DHHL in full by the first day of operations. DHHL will not be put out by that $5 million investment. It will come back to the department. Now, the next question is, how do we make money off of this? All bets that are lost to the house are considered gross gaming revenue. The industry standard for taxes range from 25% to 50%. We're proposing a 45% wagering tax. And this is the breakdown of how that money will be distributed. 75% of the wagering tax will be deposited into the Hawaiian Home Operating Fund for home development and land acquisition. That is the primary purpose of this bill, and the majority of the revenue is dedicated to that purpose. 5% of the revenue will be dedicated to the Native Hawaiian Rehabilitation Fund. You just approved the pilot program for down payment assistance. This is additional funds into that fund in order to make initiatives like that possible. 15% will go to the state general fund, and 5% will go to the state gaming fund, which we're creating. And the purpose of the state gaming fund is fourfold. One, we are encouraging the state to create a compulsive gamblers program. Currently, there is none in the state, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're also asking the state use it for investment in public safety. Next is for Native Hawaiian job training at the integrated resort. Third, we want to see it used for roads and infrastructure to address traffic problems that could be caused by the integrated resort. And lastly, for future operations and administrative costs for the Hawaii Gaming Commission. Now, we've heard a number of concerns. We had over 160 pieces of testimony on this. And I'll be honest, 90% of them were in opposition. And many of them are based on harms that are based on outdated data. And I'm happy to share that with you now. We had the very fortunate opportunity to work and talk with Dr. Catherine Spildy, who is one of the leading experts in the country on the impacts of gaming on communities. And with her assistance, we were able to get data that I think will surprise you and has surprised others. One of the first concerns is that introducing an integrated resort will increase crime in the surrounding neighborhood. The data shows that that's not true. In fact, the introduction of an integrated resort can lead to only a statistically insignificant increase in violent street felonies, which evens out over time. Statistically insignificant increase meaning it's almost immeasurable. Vehicular crime decreased in studied casino areas in some studies, and residential burglary and drug crime demonstrated a statistically insignificant decrease as well. Studies show that there is no direct link between gaming and crime, and in fact, in some cases, the number of crimes and crime rates decreased in communities with casinos. That's not to say that crime isn't a risk, but due to corporate social responsibility, the investment and the importance of making sure that these operations are profitable can mitigate the potential for crime. The data shows that. When the number of visitors of gaming cities is taken into account, the risk and incidence of victimization decreases for residents. And lastly, the data shows that the threat of illegal and unregulated gambling is greater than the introduction of a single integrated resort on Oʻahu. As you folks are aware, gambling already exists in Hawaii, and we offer no programming to support those who are compulsive gamblers as it stands. That said, allowing it to go unregulated is a greater risk than a single integrated resort. The second bucket of concerns relate to problem gambling, which we also refer to as compulsive gambling or gambling addiction. One of the first concerns is that an integrated resort will introduce problem gambling to Hawaii. And the data shows that's also not true. Problem gambling, state to state across the country right now, is between 1% to 2%, including in Hawaii right now. Our rate as of 2016 was 2.2%, and we do nothing for those individuals. Second, the concern is that Hawaii residents and Native Hawaiians will develop gambling problems at alarming rates. The data shows that there may be a momentary rise in problem gambling in the initial rollout, but once the novelty wears off, the rate restabilizes back at 1% to 2% of the population, and this is seen across the country as well. A concern is that integrated resorts and casinos cause problem gambling, and third-party academic research fails to link disordered gambling rates or problem gambling rates to gambling expansion. And lastly, there's a concern that our youth will be at risk, but the data actually shows the opposite, that over the long term, starting in 1992 in Minnesota, for example, they saw a decrease in gambling amongst public school students. The idea that gambling creates these problems, the potential is there for risk, but I think what the nearly 500 operations across this country have shown is that the appropriate investment can mitigate all of these risks. The final concern that we've heard is that this bill and gaming is inconsistent with who we are as Hawaiians and is inconsistent with the brand of Hawaii or the Aloha spirit or our culture. And to that, I say it's not true. You need only look to Dr. Kenneth Emery from the Bishop Museum, who documented that in their sports and games, the Hawaiians differed from all other branches of the Polynesians in their passion for betting. Our famed historian David Malo extensively documented the amount of betting and how adept Native Hawaiians were at it in their games of skill and chance. Our Prince Kuhio Kalanianaʻole himself was fond of betting, and our Queen Liliuokalani in the final years of her cabinet proposed a national lottery. The narrative that gaming is not Hawaiian, that we should not be gambling on Aloha, is not our narrative. That narrative comes from individuals from other states who want to make sure that we are not cutting into their profits. The entire industry of Aloha was built on the backs of Native Hawaiians, on our values, on our goodwill, and on our culture. And for that entire history of 100 years, we have been the product in that industry. We have never been at the table. We have never had an opportunity to be in the driver's seat of our economic future. You will see this session, if we can get this through commission, and I hope it does. If this goes to the legislature, you will see millions of dollars spent by lobbying from out of state to keep gambling out of Hawaii. Not because gambling is inconsistent with Aloha. It is because they are dependent on shipping Aloha to other states in order to make money for themselves. The conservative low estimate, and I'm sure that's what many people are wondering, for revenue is $30 million a year at the low end. But I would remind you that there are billion-dollar operations for some tribal governments. This bill is the single greatest opportunity we have to put ourselves in the dominion of exercising economic self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency is self-determination. Self-reliance is an act of sovereignty. This is a very real chance for Hawaiians to be in the driver's seat on the economic engine for our own futures, and to make sure that it directly benefits and fulfills beneficiaries and helps us solve the problem of putting Hawaiians on lands. And so with that, I thank you for your patience, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you folks may have.
David?
Thank you, Tyler, for your impassioned plea. For me, the devil is always in the details, and so the problem that I have is with a one-day notice. You're asking us to make a decision that has a very, very long impact on the department. And so, you know, had this come to a committee, if this had been a result of a committee that had been formed by the commission to study this, to take a look at different things, to talk to people, I think it may have been different. But basically what you're saying as far as the data is concerned is you're making a statement and asking us just to trust that your conclusion is correct. And I'm not in a position to say that you're not correct. All I'm saying is I'm not in a position to know anything other than what you've told us. And I think that the reaction that we've seen from the public and from our beneficiaries is a result of that this was not driven by this commission. This seems to have been something that just popped up overnight, and then we're being asked to vote positively on this. And so, you know, while there may be benefits in here, as Commissioner Oʻahu mentioned, just from your presentation, you and this is just a comment on what you've said. So you said this is an effort for self-sufficiency, for self-determination. However, in your plan, what you do is you give the selection process to a political body, the governor, to make decisions for the Hawaiians. And you just finished telling us how poorly our political system has treated us. So I can't imagine why we would do that if our goal is self-determination and to move the Lahui forward. We're going to give it to 4 people, 5 people, one of which you would like to be a Hawaiian. So I really don't understand how the Gaming Commission would represent the interests of our beneficiaries if there's only one Hawaiian on there. So I have a lot of concerns, and I'm at this point I'm not convinced that I would support this effort. And I understand what you're saying, but as far as that, you know, the people that want to vote against it will mobilize and it'll get shot down next year. But I think our beneficiaries deserve the best look at this possible. And I think the only way to do that is to take our time and to understand what it is that we're getting into, consulting with them, especially on such an issue which is required, right? Since this is a disposition of land that is going to be for more than that's not going to be used for homes. So this commission has to make that determination that it's not suitable. So anyway, I don't know that I have any question. I just wanted to make sure that I made those comments